Hi everyone, in this video we'll take a look at Pop! OS, Linux distribution based on top of Ubuntu and GNOME desktop experience. Now, Pop! OS is relatively new in the market. I myself have come across Pop! OS fairly recently, and I've been trying Pop! OS for the past couple of weeks within a virtual environment, and my plan was to evaluate it, and if found suitable, I probably will look at deploying it on some of the physical servers. My overall assessment of Pop! OS is that it's truly remarkable in terms of the quality of experience, specifically for a GNOME-based desktop, and overall I think it has all the key elements of a modern, slick, and minimal desktop experience. So to give you an idea of why I'm looking at Pop! OS, probably worthwhile illustrating my rationale for looking and evaluating at desktop. So essentially what I'm looking for is a Debian or even an Ubuntu based Linux distribution with the GNOME desktop. You might also refer to it as GNOME. So that's basically the criteria I was looking for, and reality is there aren't that many options out there when you're looking for Debian plus GNOME based desktop that's readily available in the market. So apart from say System 76, which is again based on Ubuntu, you obviously have the Ubuntu itself that comes now with the GNOME desktop. They've dropped Unity in favor of the GNOME desktop. And the other option is you could install Debian, vanilla Debian, and install GNOME on top of it. So essentially what I'm trying to get to is that I'm looking for a good starting point. A good starting point that has Debian slash Ubuntu and has GNOME and gives me pretty much the basis that I need that I can then build on top of. And that's what led me to Pop! OS. So Pop! OS from get-go, it provides a really slick interface. So I'm not going to demo the actual installation process, but I'll point you to the URL here. But one of the things you'll notice is these are the various screenshots from the installation process. And I would say it's been a while since I've actually seen an installation process that was this elegant and this simple. The only glitch I had when trying to install it within a virtual box was because of my main Windows screen resolution was actually chopping off the buttons here, but I could get around that. But apart from that, I thought the installation experience, which is your first impressions of the operating system, was really slick, very user friendly, very minimal, and to the point. So from get-go, you have a really clean experience with Pop! OS. Once you've installed Pop! OS, and again, a couple of options that you have when you are installing, which worked in my favor, was you have two options to install. You have the standard download, and you also have the download with the NVIDIA drivers pre-installed. Now, for me, this is a big deal, and if on your environment you work with an NVIDIA graphics card, specifically if you're doing things like machine learning, if you're using TensorFlow or PyTorch, that's a huge time saver. On my host machine, which I'm currently running Ubuntu, it took me a couple of days to actually fine-tune and set all the NVIDIA drivers correctly and get it working with TensorFlow. But one of the benefits of working with System 76, their Pop! OS, is that you can readily download the NVIDIA based driver. So that's a huge advantage in itself. So what does Pop! OS actually look like? Let me close the browser here. This is basically what you get. And as I mentioned, I'm looking for the GNOME based desktop. And if you're not familiar with it or not a huge fan of GNOME, maybe you like the KDE or the Cinnamon, the Linux Mint kind of like desktop experience, which is very similar to like the Windows like paradigm, the Windows operating system like look and feel. So folks who are familiar with the Windows based desktop experience, they will be right at home with some of these. Now GNOME, since GNOME 3 they've taken a radically different stance, and if you're already using the latest version of Ubuntu, you're already experiencing a lot of GNOME, the desktop experience already. But this is what you get with Pop! OS and the GNOME experience. So this is the vanilla GNOME. But one of the things I really like about it is that overall quality of experience. Now, GNOME doesn't offer a lot in terms of things like animation and transitions and transparency, but where it does it really, really well. And that's where I think Pop! OS have really done an excellent job in terms of that quality of experience. It really feels very modern, very slick, and it's just like thinking about driving a car. I mean, when you see a car, you never get to understand how it actually drives. So I would encourage you to actually take Pop! OS out for a spin, because some of the things, apart from the visual experience, it's in terms of how it feels, how it responds, and overall, I would say it's really, really slick. There's hardly any lag, and I'll show you in a few minutes a few different GNOME experiences, but I've never seen a GNOME experience this slick. So again, it's something that ticked that box fairly quickly. Again, I'm running this within a virtual box environment, but I would imagine that on a physical bare metal box, the experience would be equally good, if not better. Let's start with a few experiences that we have in Pop! OS. So again, given the workflow paradigm, which is something that you start adopting if you use GNOME. Again, the idea of GNOME is that the operating system, the experience actually is not up in your face. It's really in the background, and it just melts into the background and only comes to life when you really need it. For example, the activities pane by default is tied to your super key, which if you're using a Windows-based keyboard is the Windows key, and you're prompted with the main view here, and you can launch applications, search applications. So again, I won't make this all about the GNOME desktop because this is all standard GNOME. But a few of the things that kind of stand out again is how slick it is. Again, let's say for example, if you wanted to open a terminal, you can bind it to shortcuts, or the alternative, press start and you can pretty much search for anything. So say for example the terminal, and you can see that the experience is really, really fluid. So again, it goes with the standard GNOME Windows Manager theme. So for example, on this installation, this is a vanilla installation, and the only software that I've installed is NeoFetch. So if we run NeoFetch here, you can see that in Pop! OS, currently I'm running 1910, which is based on top of the Ubuntu underlying version, and it uses the GNOME desktop experience as well as the Windows Manager, and you can actually see some of the elements of the GNOME Windows Manager here, and what makes Pop! OS stands out is their custom themes and icons. Speaking of which, it has a very, very modern look and feel. So for example, if I open the Files application, also formerly referred to as Notalis in GNOME, you can see that the theme and the icons are a consistent experience throughout the operating system. It has a very modern look and feel. Me personally, I like the flat design. It has a very modern appeal, very minimalistic, but still quite modern, and works really nicely. In terms of the overall experience, as I mentioned, I'm only looking for a good starting point, and I generally tend to tweak the look and feel for Pop! OS, I'm sorry, for any operating system. But in terms of Pop! OS, in all reality, I only had to make 3 changes. Change number 1 was I wanted to make a change to the background. The default background was quite loud. I think this was the background, and I preferred something a little darker. The second thing I've done is I prefer the dark theme This is my preferred theme, and I think it accentuates the overall experience. It's more pleasing on the eyes, and if, for example, in your favorite IDE, you prefer a dark theme, then you will find this really attractive. So I like the dark theme, and the only other change that I made is given that you tend to rely a lot on the search. Say for example, if you're searching for an application like say for example draw, you'll notice that the default is for the search results to also come via the pop shop, which is their equivalent app store. Which is a nice touch if you wanted to install applications, very similar to elementary OS in terms of how you can install applications through the app store. But I don't prefer it coming up in the search results. So the way you can change that is actually bravo search. Let's actually search for search itself, and it'll come up with the default configurations for search. And here you can see that the pop shop is one of the options enabled by default, and I prefer to disable that. So those were three changes I've made. So one is the dark theme, the background, and disable the search within the pop shop results, and that's pretty much where I am, and I've been really happy with the overall experience. Again, one of the things that if you're coming from say Ubuntu or even the vanilla GNOME experience, one of the things that Pop OS have done is they've changed the some of the defaults for the keyboard shortcuts. And again, if you're using GNOME, one of the huge attractions is to work with a keyboard, more of a keyboard centric experience as opposed to relying on your mouse. Again, say for example, if we were to launch Firefox, for example, again, much of the layout you can control it with the keyboard. So for example, if you wanted to change whether it's on the left, on the right, the regular mode, or maximize it, or even close the window, it all can be done through the keyboard. All those interactions, as you can see, my mouse pointer is right here in the center, but every one of these experiences I've done through the keyboard based layout. Speaking of which, what Pop OS have done is they've modified some of the default key bindings, but I find this to be actually more preferable than what you have with the standard GNOME desktop. But in any case, if you wanted to change the navigation, of course you can actually search for keyboards and shortcuts, and this will tell you all the defaults that have been set up in case of Pop OS. Again, a few things that I typically like to do would be, say for instance, if you wanted to open the browser, for example, you can add a quick shortcut. So we can say the super key with B, for example. So you can set it so next time when you press super key and B, that's Firefox or whichever is your default browser. Or for example, this might be handy if you're coming in from a Windows background. If you wanted to open Explorer, it's the Windows key plus E. So again, if you wanted to set that, it's fairly trivial to do so. But in general, I found that the defaults that you have here, particularly with just the super key and the arrow key navigation, is a lot more convenient than the default. In some cases, you have to use page up and page down in the default GNOME experience. But again, in terms of Pop OS, they've actually streamlined that really well. And lastly, just quickly pointing out that one of the things I look for in an OS is that it's not bloated with a lot of software. I prefer to install software on a one-on-one basis as opposed to getting a whole lot of software up front. And as you can see, it's a fairly minimal set of installations. There's a bunch of system software, and then there's the few key utilities and LibreOffice. And that's pretty much it. So again, it's quite minimal, and I prefer an operating system which gives me the most minimal experience. And lastly, I keep telling lastly, but there's still a bunch of things to show you. But the navigation and the transition that you can see from across workspaces again is really smooth. So say for example, again this is a standard GNOME, but again what I wanted to emphasize is how slick and smooth that transition is between workspaces. There's no lag and it doesn't look jagged. Really smooth experience overall. Finally, before I close out, just going back to the very beginning, I mentioned that what I was looking for in operating system was primarily a Debian / Ubuntu base with GNOME, and overall I find Pop! OS really simple to use and really slick. But again, just a quick comparison of the experience. Now that you've seen Pop! OS, just a quick comparison with some of the other options that you have here. So again, on my host machine, this host machine which I have is a reasonably powerful computer, and I was running Ubuntu again with the drivers installed for NVIDIA drivers. I've got a 1080 Ti, and as I mentioned, it wasn't exactly easy, but not very laborious either. But I am planning to actually now move to Pop! OS and see how well the NVIDIA driver setup works. But speaking of Ubuntu, just as an example, since we've got this desktop experience, just comparing it side by side, again, visual appeal is a personal choice, but I find that the Ubuntu experience, it feels a bit outdated, showing signs of age. I prefer again this modern minimalistic design. It kind of makes looks like an Android experience within Pop! OS. Again, very easy to navigate and use. Again, it's some of these are personal preferences. I'm just emphasizing that the look and feel of Pop! OS is quite modern. And then the other option is what if you just wanted to install GNOME with Debian vanilla. So here's another example of what that would look like. So here I have vanilla Debian with GNOME, but as you can see, it's a little far off from the starting point which I was hoping that it would give me. Again, it's fast and slick, but it lacks some of the refinement and that overall quality of experience. So again, it's you have choices, and that's a great thing, but overall I found Pop! OS to be quite remarkable in terms of achieving that balance across that quality of experience with a very modern, slick and minimal experience. So that has been my assessment using Pop! OS for the past couple of weeks. Let me know what your thoughts are, and what's your favorite GNOME experience. So again, I've tried apart from Ubuntu and with working with Debian, the other option that I've tried includes Manjaro. You have the Manjaro with GNOME, and I found that outside of Pop! OS, I thought this was one of the better experiences that you have with GNOME. But again, some of the things, the experiences, they're not vanilla GNOME. But again, it depends on your personal preferences. If you like Arch Linux with GNOME experience, of course, Manjaro is your best bet. Pop! OS is one of the choices that you have out there, but personally, it's now become like my current favorite. Let me know what your thoughts are. Hope you find this video helpful. Give it a thumbs up if you like it, and thanks for watching.